Hi, I'm Peter Capaldi. I play the Doctor, and you're watching EMS Productions.
Hello everyone and welcome along to my second video as part of my celebration of 50 years of the Cybermen, where I'm finally going to review a classic Who episode, and what better than to review the very first Cybermen episode from 50 years ago today. It is The 10th Planet. So I watched it last night for the first time. I think I've watched it once before, but I don't really remember much about it. And so going in, I thought, oh, it's generally thought to be quite a good story. Obviously, the last part's missing, so that means it's animation. But I watched the animation, and it's quite a good animation. I think it's better than quite a few of them. It's a good one. But yeah, in terms of the episode itself, or the story, I'll roll with the word story, I think, for this, because it's classic Who. You know, got to use the right terminology. Serial, you prefer that? No, but this story, I was a little bit underwhelmed personally. I mean, yes, we're celebrating 50 years of the Cybermen, I should be all positive and stuff, but I want to give a real review of the story, not just sort of a fake positive one because it's celebrating 50 years and that kind of thing. I mean, I talked about good stuff yesterday, so now I'll talk about the not so good episode that is The 10th Planet. It's got its good points, but I felt that overall it was slightly underwhelming. It didn't quite work for me, but I'll get into that. So obviously the bulk of the story is set on this sort of polar base in the South Pole in 1986. It's always interesting to look at what they think the future is, which is actually now 30 years ago, but I always like that in old Doctor Who or old sci-fi and stuff when they predict the future kind of thing. And they implied that the moon landing had only happened a few weeks before that, so they were kind of 15 years late predicting the moon landing, I guess. But there you go. So it's set on what seems, at least an early classic cyber story, seems to be the kind of natural habitat for a cyber story. When you've got the moon base and Tomb of the Cybermen, it's all these kind of snowy bases / planets kind of thing. I'm not sure whether there's quite a reason for that. Maybe I'm being an idiot, but I'm fairly sure that's kind of just coincidental. I mean, the Cybermen aren't particularly loving the cold. They don't like radiation. That was their Achilles heel of 1966, radiation, apparently. It becomes gold and then basically nothing. But at this point it's radiation, so that's something for it. And so it's set on this polar base where it's all going a bit wrong, sending some astronauts, trying to bring some astronauts down or something. They've been out doing something, I didn't quite get what they were up in the air for. But they were meant to be coming back and they couldn't because they discovered a new planet called Mondas. Ding. The cyber planet, of course, looks like Earth, blah blah blah. I'm sure you guys know the storyline to 10th Planet. If not, watch it. So I won't ramble through the whole story, but it's I have a few problems with it in general, this story, which I think one of the biggest things is just the lack of the Doctor in it. He feels hideously underused. I mean, I understand a lot of it was down to his health situation, so he just couldn't do that much, but sort of looking at it from a story point of view, not from an acting outside view kind of thing, it feels like the Doctor doesn't do very much, really. They kind of turn up 10 minutes into episode 1, he wanders around, looks all like I know everything kind of thing, says a few words, doesn't really do much, just says, oh look, I knew what was going to happen, and suggests what they should do. So that's his episode 1 role pretty much. He doesn't do very much. Episode 2 he does very little, and then he collapses at the start of episode 3 and misses the whole of that, and then he comes back in episode 4, collapses again, does a little bit of talking, and then he goes and regenerates. So that was kind of a little bit disappointing for me because it doesn't feel like he's the main character in this story. It feels like the sort of main guys on that base, I can't even remember their names. This is terrible, I can't remember their names. But it feels like those guys are the main characters of this story, not the Doctor. I mean, Ben and Polly are a little bit more main character, but it does very much feel like the Doctor isn't the main character of the story. Obviously, as I said, a lot of it's down to his health situation, but it does just, I feel, impact on the story, and personally I find that a little bit disappointing, because I do quite like the first Doctor. He's not my favourite, but I do quite like his sort of style and the way he is a little bit more grumpy, but then he mellows through his era and stuff, but he doesn't really do enough for me in this story to kind of bump it up on that, I think. So that was one of the major disappointments. Now, one thing that I really did like from this story was the end of episode 1, the cliffhanger they have where the Cybermen first appear, which I think works, is a really, really brilliant cliffhanger. I mean, okay, then the Cybermen are rubbish costumes. I mean, there's no doubting that. They're not great. And their sort of efforts at killing people initially are a bit pathetic, where they just kind of go "What?" on these people's backs and they suddenly collapse. It looks very unconvincing. But ignoring that, I think it's a really great cliffhanger, and then this final shot you get panning up of the Cyberman, and you can see his human hand, which I think is absolutely fantastic that they show that, because that's the idea of Cybermen, is that they used to be humans, they've been upgraded, removed emotions, created into better beings, this kind of thing. And in New Who, at least, we don't see any of that, because they're just in a cyber suit and completely metal suit kind of thing. And frankly, this is the only story where you really see proper human parts of their body, seeing this human hand that they've got on the end there, rather than it all being upgraded in future episodes. I think that's kind of a more chilling sort of idea, where it makes it much more clear that these people were humans, they were normal people. They still kind of are, except they're cybered a bit. That's a good word, cybered. So I thought that worked really, really well to sort of introduce the Cybermen to the audience for the first time, to be able to initially show that hand, and then panning up to this interesting looking face with a big flashlight on top of his head. Bit of cloth over his face and a flashlight on his head. It's low budget 60s BBC. Come on, let's let him off that. But no, so that was one of the highlights, I think, of the story, was this cliffhanger moment, and just that idea of them being human. But as it's Celebrate the Cybermen, I feel I should focus on the Cybermen in this story. And after their initial cliffhanger nice moment, it kind of feels like they don't do all that much. They've got interesting plans and stuff, and they come in sitting around. They're quite kind of clever and devious. They're quite clever and got a quite good plan. I mean, they kind of turn all what the humans think is all they're being saved, because they spend all of episode kind of 3 trying to stop this bomb being fired at the side of the Modern Dash, which would have just killed everybody on Earth pretty much. And they manage to stop it, and then suddenly the Cybermen and the Cybermen magically turn it around, and then they're suddenly able to use this massive doomsday weapon to blow up the Earth. So I thought that was quite ingenious from the Cybermen. Clearly they're in a kind of a desperate stage, because their planet's dying, absorbing too much energy, and therefore going to disintegrate and explode as it did at the end. And so they're kind of desperate to get that sorted out, and the Doctor does his classic Silurian, let's all live together, happy families, the Cybermen and the humans living together, because that works a lot in the future, doesn't it, Doctor? But it shows that it's consistent with his character, because then we see that with the Silurians and the Sea Devils, and then the Silurians again, and various other ones where he's saying, yeah, we can live together as 2 separate races, and this kind of thing. So I just thought it was quite a nice moment that the Doctor introduced that earlier on than I'd ever known was a thing, kind of thing. So that was good. But other than the Cybermen's clever planning, it doesn't feel like they do very much. They kind of stand around, have their slightly annoying voices. Personally, I'm not quite sure what to think of the voices. They're kind of just get a bit grating, I think, after a period. Yes, they're nice, they're very different and interesting, but they do kind of get a bit grating. Just the pitch of the sound and stuff, it just slightly annoying on your ears, I find, after a period of time them talking. So that kind of felt I let them down a bit. Obviously the costume's not much, but I don't feel like that sort of lets them down all that much, really. But other than that, they just don't, they don't do much. They kind of stand around looking poor. There's only even 3 of them for episode 2, and then they kind of are a bit useless and all get killed at the end of episode 2. And then we don't get any more till episode 4, where about 10 of them walk over and get killed, ambushed by the humans. So it kind of seems like the Cybermen aren't particularly clever in that, not very good. They're kind of very easily getting killed by the humans. They're not very good at holding onto their weapons, I think it's fair to say. And they're just underused generally. I mean, they're in episode 2 and half of episode 4, and that's it, in a 4-part story. I mean, it just felt like too much of the story wasn't focused on the things that are actually interesting, like the Doctor and the Cybermen. We're all focused on this grumpy general dude trying to get some astronauts out of space that we couldn't care less about, and then his son and stuff. And it felt like they were wasting too much time on that plot line of the story rather than focusing on Cybermen and on the Doctor. Maybe there's reasons behind that, but that's what struck me with this story. So really there isn't that much more to say about the Cybermen in this story, other than they have some interesting plans. They don't come off. As soon as their planet blows up, they suddenly disintegrate into nothing like their planet. They must be linked to it properly in the energy and stuff, I think the Doctor says. So that was kind of them all gone. I'm not sure how they come back in the moon base yet, because I haven't actually watched the moon base yet. So that's good move, Elliot. You recorded a top 5 rankings video yesterday for cyber stories and you haven't even seen them all. I'm a proper review and rankings YouTuber here. Really do all the research, yeah. So I don't know how they come back in the moon base really. Obviously they look all different. Maybe it's a different sort of faction of them or something. I don't really know. I'll have to watch Moon Base someone. You can let me know if you want. I don't really mind. I'm not kind of too concerned about minor spoilers from 49 years ago. I can live with those. So, yeah, but the Cybermen are all gone. The last part to focus on of this story, I guess, is the ending and the Doctor's final sort of few moments. I mean, the Doctor's rather strange throughout this story. Well, the last two parts, when he kind of randomly collapses for no apparent reason. Like some force. I think the subtitles on the reconstructions say the Doctor has been taken over by some invisible force or something. So I'm not quite sure. He says his body's wearing a bit thin. Clearly that's just trying to lead in to him collapsing and then regenerating at the end of the episode. I guess they would kind of... It was all very experimental, this whole regeneration concept at this time. I mean, I don't think it was even called regeneration, was it? So it was just suddenly he changed into someone else. But I think that William Hartnell does a very good job of those last few lines, the kind of iconic "it's far from all over" line, which he does at the end, which I think he does really well. It just works so well with him doing it, and then but then he does all this mysterious stuff and what's going on. Suddenly he goes in the TARDIS, and then it's completely taken over by this invisible force, collapses and regenerates into Patrick Troughton, which it's a fairly good scene. I mean, thank goodness we actually have it, unlike most of episode 4. Big up Blue Peter for keeping all those episodes so we can actually watch the regeneration scene without animation. That's always nice. And obviously the effects are dated on that. It's a fairly simple, just kind of crossfade effect into the new face. That's with a kind of bright light shot onto it as well to try and mask it a bit. And but I do quite like how it's in sync with the regeneration, with the sorry, not regeneration, the TARDIS sound effect. As the TARDIS is kind of dematerialising, it's like the first incarnation of the Doctor is dematerialising, and then the second Doctor is materialising in his place, is what it kind of feels like. Nice little sort of parallel there, which I quite like. So that scene is definitely those last few minutes with the Doctor regenerating and that whole scene around that, I think is one of the highlights of the episode. It is really, really, really good stuff there, and it was a nice way to end it after a slightly disappointing story, personally. I thought that was a nice way to end it. Well, this has hardly been an in-depth review like I used to do, but this is how I'm doing reviews from now on. I'm sticking to these sort of 15 minutes-ish tops, just because people weren't watching. And maybe some of you were, but there wasn't enough people watching the 45-minute reviews. It didn't seem worth it, really, to me. And so that's why I've gone for the shorter reviews. Hope you're still enjoying it, and I can still give you a fair insight into the kind of main points, but rather than kind of talking through the whole episode, I feel it's better to just pick up the main points of the stories and focus on that. So overall, with the 10th Planet, I'd say it's a slightly disappointing episode, just different story. I need to stop saying the wrong words. It's a slightly disappointing story, but with a very nice ending with William Hartnell's regeneration, and the Cybermen mixed. So I'd sort of give it a solid 7 out of 10-ish, kind of. It's okay, don't quite get the hype, but it's a solid enough story. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, this review. Go watch the 10th Planet if you haven't already. I would recommend it. I know I didn't say it's the greatest episode ever, but it's still very much worth a watch, and I think it's a very important story, if not a very, very good story, because it introduces regeneration and the Cybermen, which are two of the biggest things in Doctor Who for the next 50 years since then. So it is a very important story, if it's not the most spectacular, exciting story you've ever seen, I think. So, hope you enjoyed this review. This is my second of 3 videos in relation to 50 Years of the Cybermen, and the final one will be coming, hopefully this time tomorrow, with a special, let's just say it will have a musical flavour for Cybermen and Doctor Who. But that's all I'll say on that for now. So, thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember to like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, @EMS_Productions. And I will see you tomorrow, hopefully, for another video. Goodbye.